Well, you can do what you're offering on, was it Erie Road between? Yeah, there's other fixes where you could grade it. Anyway, I just don't want to spend that kind of money. There's way too much money. Put it on a more heavily traveled road. That's what I say. And I drive it, so.
You don't drive, Bob.
Driving Miss Nancy.
We just watched the majority of the things the other night.
Did you?
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township for February 18th, 2020. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Tinneberry, could you open us up in prayer? Mr.
Shall we pray? Father God, we are thankful that you are a God that we can depend on, that we can turn to in times of need. And Father, we also know that your ways are not our ways, so we do ask for discernment. We ask for wisdom, and we pray that each member of the board tonight would speak with intelligence. They would speak with your heart behind them, and that their decisions would be pleasing and acceptable in your sight. Father, we thank you for your presence here tonight, and now we'll pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bob. Okay, item 2 is approval of the agenda. We just have to add one more road contract. Let's see. It's Washington Street. And then obviously we got the item to switch out for 6B. Everybody has that?
What?
That's 8E.
It's the change order.
The change order.
Thank you.
Well, other than that, that's it. I look for a motion.
Motion to approve agenda
I'll support.
With the changes?
with the changes.
Motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 3, consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to A, approve and place on file the minutes of the February 4th, 2020 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, approve and place on file the revenue expense report and balance sheet for the period ending January 31st, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item C off and for a short discussion, and otherwise I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda, A and B.
I'll support.
Okay, motion and support is submitted. Just please call the roll.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 3C, approve and place on file the revenue expense report and balance sheet for the period ending January 31st, 2020. Ms. Tinneberry?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, since I had brought this up in a previous public meeting, and ask about the budget, remaining amount or percentage, that I did find it after all these years in the treasurer's balance sheet, and looking that over, it was good education for me too, because I found some places where we are over budget in some areas. One was extreme. Let's see, what was that? Anyway, one is like 72% over, and one is, oh, here it is. It's actually it's in the treasurer's budget, 217%. So I'm just saying, as I've mentioned before, I personally, as a trustee, would like to see those items brought for budget adjustments before we spend the money, before we're 200% over. That situation, I understand, that was seasonal wages, which during tax season, I understand, can go over. But as soon as we do go over, I'd like to have the budget adjustment come then. Here, go ahead.
You're correct, it's over, but. You're correct, it's over. The problem is, all the expense has been charged to the sewer department, and it should have been split.
I
So
see.
it's an adjustment. I'm not going to change the amount in total, I don't think, but it should be in both departments.
I see. Well, see, there again, that's one of those,
I agree.
discrepancies, errors, whatever you want to call it, that I just think is not good governmental finance, budgeting, whatever. So I just want to make mention of that because it is in, for anyone wanting to find the budget remaining, it does give the percent that you're over, it gives the percent you're under as well, too. For instance, here's, 94% at 54%, one of them is 100%. So it tells you where you are in the budget for that particular department. But like I said, I wanted to draw attention also to budget adjustments that we need to be more timely on having them before we spend the money.
Okay, any more discussion or comments?
I think we need to approve that since it wasn't approved in the.
You want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll move that we approve item 3C on the consent agenda to place on file the revenue expense report and the balance sheet for the period ending January 31st, 2020.
I'll support. Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 4, presentations. Update, Alfred Prieur. Al has been attending different seminars, and he's been attending SEMCOG basically since he's come to the office. He's been very involved. He's involved with the county in a number of different ways. So I thought it'd be a great idea for Al to come and give an update to the board on what he's been doing. So, thank you, Al.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, in terms of updating you on SEMCOG, they've got a lot of good things going on. The first thing to update you on is I sat on the bicycle task force, which we compiled this report, which just got put on the website for SEMCOG. And this is a continuation of what they tried to do in 2014, and they're bringing it forward. To give you an idea, the reason why connectivity and bicycling and so on is important to our region, bicycling alone to the state of Michigan is worth about $630 million. Because usually bikers aren't spending just $89 for a bike, or they're going to restaurants and that type of thing. So there is a focus on that. But the thing is also they're taking a look at is when we connect, we can sell our region better. Young families want to come in, and some of the things they're looking at is how do we get to your parks? Where's your bike trails? Can I ride my bike to work? And these are all questions that are going on, and it's not only in Oakland County, it's in Monroe County, and this is the way that we're going to attract people. And for example, one of the things SEMCOG has done, and we have some of these down in the lobby, they have an app called Park Finder. So if you decide, hey, I'm up in Wayne County, what kind of parks do you have? You go to that app and say, hey, I think I want to go to this park today. Or maybe I want to go down to Huron or whatever. So these are some of the things that they're developing, the tools for us all to use within our region. So that's one of the things that we've been working on. The other thing SEMCOG just started too is an economic development task force, because although we're finding, everybody thinks Michigan is doing great, we are doing much better. However, we've got some issues to deal with. We still have more people leaving than coming. Our housing stock overall, for example, when Amazon, when they took a look at the Detroit area, one of their biggest factors was you couldn't house us. You don't have enough housing units, new or existing. And we're seeing some of that too, and I'll get to that in a minute, here in Monroe County as well. The other thing that's going on, if you're not aware, is the Gordie Howe Bridge. Rick, I hate to tell you, but I-75 is going to get tore up again.
You don't have to tell me, you're just reminding me.
Exactly. They've already started the work on the Canadian side. They have started the work on the American side in terms doing testing on houses, starting to do some of the road work and so on. Keep in mind, we are not paying for that bridge. The Canadians are, but they get to keep the tolls. But that's going to move freight and everything else so much quicker. The economic impact on that, I don't have a dollar amount, but it's huge. And a matter of fact, they are already trying to get the workers together, iron workers, millwrights, to assemble, because it's going to suck up a lot of labor. So that's one thing SEMCOG keeps us informed on all the time to what's happening on that. The next thing to, SEMCOG, if you go to their website, they are always doing seminars. They've always got something going on, either webinars or you go down Detroit. So I try and hit some of those that I think are relative in terms of our county. And some of the connections I make are very good too, because some of the sharing that goes on about different problems, different issues, a lot of us have the same issues. So sometimes it's good to hear somebody else talk about it and get a little different perspective on how we might be able to solve some problems. The other thing that we're taking a look at on Lewis Avenue, we are waiting to get bids back in terms of trying to do a tax capture. So that's what we're waiting for on that. That's kind of like the next step. The four corners were done down in Temperance. If you haven't been through there, there's a few things they have to do. Unfortunately, one of the walls got knocked down again. So that company's going to pay for it over at Abe's, over at the Sunoco station. So, but that project looks very good. I can attest to this. People are driving a little bit different down there because the road's marked. There's clear definition of the bike lane, and I'm watching people. They're not getting over in that bike lane. They're not hugging over to make a right-hand turn. And the pedestrian lights are great. People are stopping. They're using them. They're not blowing through the cars. They're actually paying attention to people standing on the corners now. So that was a great project. So the next phase is to try and get a tax capture, and we'll keep you informed.
But on the bike lane, it's just so everybody knows it's not done yet. Those
No, it's
stripes
going to be
will
green.
painted green.
Yeah. So they got to come back and do it. So it'll even get more vibrant in terms of that. And what's kind of neat, to get back a little bit just to the biking issue, out of SEMCOG is that some of us were sitting up there in Monroe County, and we didn't all know that we were on the same task force committee, because they send out and you sign up. Well, Florence Buchanan, who's working with Tim Lake and so on, we were all sitting there. It's like, well, geez, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, what do you, we all had this interest. So Florence said, you know what, we need to have our own bicycle task force. So we formed our own, but what was really good about that is that the Monroe Parks and Recreation have sanctioned us as a committee to work on this. So what has transpired so far, we've had a couple meetings. We actually have a route that we're taking a look at. What's exciting is the Road Commission is sitting down at the table with us and taking a look at that route, because Randy Pierce said, well, geez, if we're working on a road that's in your route, maybe we can make the shoulders bigger and that type of thing. But we are going to try and connect from Bedford to Luna Pier to Monroe to Dundee back down to Bedford. So we will have that loop is what we're working on. So we need signage. We don't necessarily need, we'd like to get shoulders, but if we can just have signs, bike routes, where to go, that type of thing. So we've got people from different parts of the county working on that. So it isn't just the Monroe guys, it's everybody doing it. So it's some really, we've all come together, and I'm pretty excited about that. So the other thing that we're doing in Monroe County, and we've had a meeting on that, is that we do have a housing issue. To get back to that, is that if you look at Bedford right now, we don't have movements in inventory. If there's a house that's priced, say, like at $150,000, it's usually gone. But the problem is we don't have much other housing stock. Before, we used to have that. Those who have lived here for a while, we used to see somebody move into like their starter home, then they might move into a home, for example, one of the past builders like Tom Huner, and then they would live in that house for a while, and then they'd move up to another house, and they might move up to another house. Well, we had houses turning. We don't have that right now in Monroe County. And that's one of our problems, and that's why we're trying to do this housing study that's going to take a look to say, what type of housing do you need? What do you have? How can you attract people to your county? And we're not just looking at Bedford, we're taking a look at the whole county, you know? And so we're taking a little bit different approach to that. And we're taking a look like, how do we get people from Wayne County to move here? How do we get people from Washtenaw to move here? Those are counties where people don't even know really where Monroe County is, in a sense, because they get up there, well, then they realize, geez, I don't live that far from Bedford. I can make that commute. It's only 30 minutes, or it might be less than an hour. Because what we did find in looking at some of the statistics is that if you draw a circle within 60 minutes, that's about what people will commute. That's what they'll tolerate, is a 60-minute commute there and back. So that's something that we're working on. Mike Pasonic is also sitting on that. So we once again, the county is engaged in this. So hopefully we'll get some good information on that to say, how do we market Bedford? How do we market Frenchtown? How do we market Dundee? Because we're all a little different. You know, we're not Dundee. We're not sitting on an expressway exit. We don't have Cabela's. On the other hand, we have Toledo in our backyard, and we've got the Mud Hens. We got easy access to 75. So all of us all have something to bring to the table when it comes to housing. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. Any questions?
Can you touch on something you've been working on for a couple of years now, and it's something that takes a long time, and the board should be seeing it soon, as the redevelopment ready program?
Yeah, I just met with MEDC on their revitalization redevelopment program. I've got quite a bit of it filled out. There's a few more things that we need on that, which then we will submit that. And then they will take a look and say, okay, here's where you're deficient, here's what you need. And then once you get through that process, and if they give you the certification, you become a redevelopment community. What does that mean? That puts you in more favorable light to get grants from the MEDC, possible financing plans for master plans, and so on. So
They'll actually give you up to $20,000 towards the master plan, but you've actually had to take 2 classes last year
Right.
to even be able to get to the next step. It's a long process.
Right.
But this stuff does take extra time because it's tough to actually leave the office and, get involved in this
Right.
stuff.
So, but it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of good things, and again, my hat's off to SEMCOG. We get a lot of good things from SEMCOG, and also to Monroe County right now, because they're engaging in different things that will help Bedford. And I don't think we've always seen that as much as we are now. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Is that report or request that you say needs to be submitted, will that be reviewed and approved by our board?
Oh, yeah, I can let you see it. It's a series of questions, and then you can take a look at it, or if there's something you want to add to it, you'll be able to do it. Yeah, so I won't send it off without everybody taking a look at it and seeing what they think. Because you might think of something else to put in there, like they have some properties to identify that, is that like in a historical district? Could this be revitalized? Can you do this? And those types of
I'm
things.
pretty sure the board has to approve it, Paul, before
Yeah.
it actually goes on.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's not something that we can do
Right.
on our own. Ms. Stenberg?
Well, I just wanted to say I'm thankful for all the work on the bike paths. When I was on the board in the 90s, Mary Kay Thayer put together a wonderful grant proposal. We got the grant. All we had to do was supply the matching funds. It would have interlinked bike paths, skateboard, whatever, all those. And the board turned it down for lack of foresight, I believe. But this younger generation, I'm not a runner, but I'm not a biker, but I see them all the time, and I'm interested in making sure that they're safe on the roadways, and I think it's vital. I think it's very necessary, especially to attract younger couples or singles, whatever. So I just want to thank you, and I hope that you continue to push for that, because it's necessary. It's been necessary for, what is that, 20 years?
Right. I mean, for example, and thanks, Nancy, is we have a bike ride that comes through here in September, and I'm talking to people like, where are you from? We've had people come here from Indiana to get on this bike ride that Bill Hoffner puts together. It's a 100-mile ride. And I get people, oh, I'm from Ann Arbor, I'm from here. And then the thing that we're getting complimented on is the condition of our roads, which is really vital for bicyclists, right? And they're saying, wow, you guys have really good roads down here. I said, well, we've had plans and asset management plans to do roads. So that is being noticed when people come here from out of town. And the one last thing I'll leave you with is that we also need to get ready for e-bikes, because trust me, I've already got my eye on one, because if I can't make it up that hill, I'm going to push that button, trust me. But it's keeping people on the roads longer because these electric assist bikes. And I was reading an article there, and it's amazing how many people, like in their 70s, are buying electric assist bikes because they don't want to quit. But they know that, hey, I can't maybe do, as hard as ride, but
Can't you just buy a moped?
no moped, Nancy, no moped.
Mr. Francis?
Yes, Mr. Francis.
Do they have e-tricycles so that you'd be able to ride one?
Yeah, maybe.
All right, we're gonna get out of here.
Thank you.
Mr. Thank you, Al, appreciate it. Okay, item 5, public comment.
Nope.
Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items. Come on up. Okay, seeing none, moving on to staff reports. Fire Department Annual Report. Chief Massingill.
Good evening. The board was delivered earlier today, or in front of your packets that have our annual report in it. I just wanted to touch on a couple of highlights really quick. So as we ended up the year, we wrapped up with 45 paid on-call members and our 4 full-time firefighter paramedics on the staff. Call volume for last year was 2,842 calls. It's about 126 calls more than we had the previous year. So we continue to see the trend upwards, and we expect that trend to continue into the foreseeable future. Of note, District 3 was the busiest district again last year. A little over 1,100 calls. District 2 to the southwest with a little over 1,000 calls, and District 1 up to the north is a little more rural. We saw 600 calls up that way last year. We had a large increase in transports from 2018 to 2019, from 20 in 2018, when, remember, we were very limited. We were just kind of breaking into the advanced life support to the full-time capability. We saw 159 patient transports, which provides better service to our residents. We're still continue to be the backup service to Monroe Community Ambulance, but when there are delays, when the county system gets overloaded, we step in and pick up the slack a little bit. So we saw a significant increase in that last year. Our fractile response times for structure fires, we were on scene. Now, from the time we were dispatched, we were on scene less than 8 minutes 93% of the time, so that's a little ahead of the national average. Our PI, so our car crashes, we saw an improvement in our car crashes. It's detailed in the report over 18. And our EMS fractal times remained largely the same, and that's very much based on the 3-station model that we have, with the ability only to staff about 1.5 of those stations full-time. So we're seeing a hold in that, but we're working to try and increase our staffed hours at the stations so that we can see an improvement in the coming year in our EMS fractile times. Interestingly enough, 93% of the time, the emergency necessitated an ambulance to respond, only 20% of the time a fire engine, and that's reflected as well when we get into the apparatus, the 30-year fleet, the fleet replacement plan, where we have pushed back the replacement of one of our reserve engines for a couple of years and accelerated the replacement of one of our older ambulances, as those are on the road consistently about 4 times more than the fire engines are. So even though we realize we're near the end of the life cycle with our 27-year-old engine, We're going to try and delay that replacement a little bit and get one of these ambulances that's on the road and facing some mechanical challenges replaced a little bit quicker. So there's a slight change in that apparatus plan based on that. By and large, there's data and statistics there for you to review, and I'll be back next month. I know it's a little late to have gotten this over to you for tonight for discussion, but if there are any questions, we'd be happy to handle them either tonight or in the next meeting.
Anybody with comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to 6B, update on Station 1 renovations, repairs, and approval of change order.
So Station 1's going well. Actually, we have a construction meeting every Tuesday morning. The construction meeting this morning brought some good news. They had identified an area in the truck bays that they were concerned with, that they may have uncovered some asbestos, but the testing went out and came back as of this morning. They've confirmed that it's not, which means that what may have been a pretty expensive, unexpected change order in addressing that, we kind of dodged that. The change orders that were delivered by Jacobs today to the clerk's office, and I believe sent out to the board. For all the changes that we've had, largely, it's been deductions the entire way across the board. So as construction has progressed, they found areas, the companies found areas in which there were cost savings that could be recognized and suggested change orders so that we could save, do a little bit better job and save some money on our end. These change orders that were sent over, the total deduct, $9,711, is up to today. Now, we understand that at any time, again, in the future, we could uncover something that we weren't so fortunate with, and there may be change orders that are an increase in cost. But as of right now, to this point in the project, everything has generally been going our way. And we're seeing a lot of deducts, a lot of value engineering on the site as they pull things apart and get a closer look at the building and start to reconstruct it. So for right now, we're at a bit of an advantage as far as the change order work that's been presented.
Always love to see reductions, so it's a good thing. I was over there with Chief last week, and it's looking very good over there. A lot of work's been done, so it's very exciting. Ms. Tinneberry?
Yes, I'd like to understand on the form, the deduct and the add. One, I mean, for instance, request number 2, the total deduct was $34,673, but the add was $32,215. So what are we adding that's,
So if you look at it, the change order request number 1, if I may, Chief,
Yes.
I know our question because at first glance, I had the same question.
Fantastic.
So you have, with change order 1, you have about $7,000, and then number 2, you have like $2,000. Those added together is then $97.11. Does that make sense?
that's not what I asked.
So what are you asking then?
I'm sure a millennial couldn't understand what I'm asking.
I don't know about that.
What is the adding back on?
So there are instances where there had been a deduction in some areas. They may have uncovered and found something that wasn't necessary, so they deducted that. But in changing the scope of the project, they had to add some of that cost back in. That's a terrible way to explain it, perhaps. For instance, the elimination of a door, it was found to be not necessary. It was on the original plan. There was some savings there, but there was also cost because we were closing off what was a prior opening. So there may have been an addition, there may have been a credit, yet
That was it, Greg.
still incurred some cost. The balance back and forth of all that is where we get the total deduct number right now.
Okay,
Does that help?
thank you, got it.
Any more comments, questions? Do you want to get
No,
it back with
no,
anything?
I'll say nothing.
Is that what you said?
No.
Want to approve this?
Do
so
we
that
need
can
a
sign it?
motion to move forward so we can sign it?
Well,
They're
okay.
asking for us to sign this and approve it. I didn't
Okay.
feel comfortable without coming to the board first for approval.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Excuse me? There's no numbers involved, so I'm just going to move that we allow the supervisor and clerk to sign the change order number 1 with a new contract sum of $691,789.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is supportive of Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Oop. Or you have to do those as two motions?
Which two?
No, it's one change order total. It's got all the pluses and minuses all in one change order.
Mm-hmm. It's one change order.
And the net is a reduction of 8,700, or 9,700, right?
97, yes, sir.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, item 8, new business, vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $49,843.27. Fire District, $42,795.66. Police Fund, $1,228.16. Park Fund, $8,999. Library Fund, $3,955.94. Stonegate SAD, $431.38. Downtown Development Authority, $910. Sewer O&M Fund, $136,281.11. Trust and Agency Fund, $334, for a grand total of $244,778.52.
Support.
Motion is supportive of Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens? Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, direction on a request to rezone from C1 local business to R2A, one family residential on parcel number 5802-665-00500 and 5802-665-00600. Borg and Lewis, Valetta and Lewis. Ms. Tinderberry?
Well, actually, this has not yet come to the Planning Commission, and the reason is because many months ago, I raised the issue about rezonings going to the board first, but I guess I didn't explain it well enough, because what transpired from there was something that I think, and the planning department and the planning commission think is too limiting, and I'm gonna ask Phil to explain it, because we have all kinds of people on this board that wouldn't understand me either.
Sure, be happy to. So, as an example, these two requested rezonings should not come to this board first. Every property owner has an absolute right to apply to the township to request that their property be rezoned from what it's currently zoned to whatever they would like it to be rezoned to. And then it goes through the process, which is somewhat abbreviated now, based, at least compared to what it used to be, in as much as we no longer have a county planning commission that reviews rezoning requests. So any property owner who wishes to apply to the township for rezoning of their property should be able to go to Karen or Jody at our planning department, fill out the application, pay the applicable fees, at which time it then goes to planning. A public hearing is done in accordance with the Zoning Enabling Act. Then it comes to this board for the actual rezoning. I think where the miscommunication was, or confusion, probably not a good term, was that if we as a township board are going to amend our zoning ordinance, as an example, to create a new zoning ordinance, or perhaps to create a new use within a zoning district that heretofore has not been contemplated or allowed, that would come to this board first to give direction perhaps to the planning department, and then it would go to the planning commission. But again, on a rezoning for a property owner, we have no business in requiring the property owner to come to this board to get permission. They should be able to file their application and proceed according to the Zoning Enabling Act.
Is there a way, because I think this board was fully understanding, I don't know about all of us, you know, of the process. And the reason that is because there's situations where businesses come into town and they have to go through this long process and do all these engineering plans, and then they get to our board and it's denied. Well, that just took 7 months, when you can come to this board in 2 to 3 weeks and find out if your project's gonna more likely move forward or not. That was the whole point of it. Now, something like this, I agree, this probably shouldn't come to us first, but there's certain situations where people bringing multi-million-dollar projects here would like to know and not waste 6, 8 months. And at least if there was an option for them to say, hey, you know, like this, I wouldn't think this would need to come to us first. I'm pretty sure this is an easy one for us, but there's some projects that they don't want to go through the process and months worth and get to us, and it ends up going down.
But that's only when they don't meet the stipulations in our ordinance. That's the only time they would have to come here. And I believe that the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, isn't something the planning department can say yay or nay to. And actually, it isn't something the planning commission should say yay or nay to, even though they work together with our attorneys to develop that ordinance. They're not voted in by the public. So in order to amend our ordinance that the board has approved, I think it has to come here first. And it's, if they are wanting to do something outside the provisions in the ordinance, then I think it has to come here first. But these things are not outside the provisions in the ordinance.
Yeah, quite frankly, I think the two of you are on the same page, so that, as an example, if a, as Paul says, a multi-million-dollar project comes in, and let's say it doesn't fit within any zoning district that we currently have, and it would require a change to the actual zoning ordinance, that was the intent, to have it come to this board first to determine what the board felt about that before it goes back to planning and goes through the process. If, on the other hand, a project came in and it fit within a zoning, district, and if where the developer wanted that project, it wasn't zoned properly, but if it was rezoned to a zoning district that we already have on the books and in our zoning ordinance, then it's not so much coming to the board to get approval, it's the property owner wanting to rezone the property to fit the project, and you wouldn't have to take that step of coming to this board first. I hope that makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. Where we got hung up before was a project was coming to Bedford Township where a certain use was envisioned or planned that we didn't have in our zoning district.
Like a mulch king,
What's that?
like a composting facility.
That's one example.
Mm-hmm.
When composting was proposed for Bedford Township, we did not have a composting ordinance. Our zoning ordinance didn't have within it an area where composting was either a principal permitted use or a special use approval project. So that's one example. Another example was the developments that have occurred and are occurring at Stearns and Secor. There was outdoor display that was requested by a property owner and an applicant. Our zoning ordinance didn't allow for outdoor display in a commercial zoning district of the scope and magnitude that was being requested. So that required reworking of the zoning ordinance to at least allow it as a special use approval project before they could even get off the ground.
So let me ask you a question. So if we vote no on this tonight, does that mean anything? I mean, they can still go through the planning process, still go through all that.
On these rezoning
Yeah, just tonight.
Why would we vote no?
I'm
I
just
mean-
saying, if
Oh,
we
I
did,
see.
I'm
I'm
saying
sorry.
they could still go through the process as normal. Tonight
Yes.
is just the
We
night
can't
that
prevent
basically tells the property owner, and don't get worried, tonight's just to let them know, hey, here's a pretty good feeling for you to move forward without having to spend a bunch of money and go through a bunch of process. The people that are going to give you the final decision in the end already basically said yes, voted yes. Mr. Steiner?
I think we're all on the same track, and this goes back to when Nancy brought this up months ago, and we talked about this. And I was actually surprised to see this and another one on here tonight. I thought the way the process was supposed to be is it comes here if it does require, as Mr. Goldsmith stated, if it requires something to be changed or amended or added to our zoning ordinance, not simple stuff like this, because this all fits within the ordinance. The applicant would have a process to go through. They've got a process to go request rezoning. They've got processes to request land splits, land divisions and combinations. Those processes are available to them. So to me, I think maybe we just lost the language there. And it really shouldn't have anything to do with normal requests that follow our ordinances. Strictly come here if it requires something to do with changing that zoning ordinance. And, I think, Paul, one of your biggest points a couple months ago, and we've all talked about, is the process it takes sometimes for these big developments to go through here, through the Planning Commission, go through the Monroe County, and then back to here, and back, to all the different agencies. And you're right, it takes 6, 7, 8 months. They've expended a lot of funds. They've expended energy, and maybe some surveys started or engineering drawings. I get that. So
let me ask you a question. So
streamline
like
it makes
the
sense.
Temperance Animal Hospital that was here a couple weeks ago, was that a project that should go to planning first or come to us first?
Again,
Go straight to planning
straight to
because it
planning.
Right,
didn't
it-
require an
because it-
amendment to our zoning
So
ordinance.
if it
It was
doesn't
a-
require amendment, and I'm fine with that. I think that's where we get hung up in the problems in the past is where, you've got an owner that's 8 months into, going through legal and going through planning and come to find out, and then it gets to the board after a year and it's like, no, well, they got big money wrapped up
Right.
into everything, and options have run out, and,
So
so
how-
I think that'd be good.
how about this, though? I mean, then if we do this and we're all stating what we think is what we're all saying together, I think, here, we need a process document because, Karen will retire someday, Jody will retire someday, this board will be gone someday. They need some kind of process document so they'll know, oh, okay, the new person that comes on board that may be a little greener, coming in, I don't know what Bedford's processes are, maybe I should know.
We really have a process, and
Yeah.
that's a zoning enabling act.
Right.
But
That's really
Well,
what it
but I'm
is.
talking about coming here, they don't
It's-
know when, we just, we've got 3 things here. We had Temperance Animal Hospital here because misinterpretation.
No, actually, it's because Karen and Jody are trying to do what the board asked them to do. We came up with a separate policy. That's what we need to either eliminate or word in such a way that it's only having to do with redrafting or editing our zoning ordinance. This is here because Jody and Karen are trying to follow and fulfill. So this is my suggestion. We go ahead and approve these. They're already here. What we're approving isn't the rezoning.
Correct.
We're approving to give Karen and the planning department the direction to move forward with these two. And then they'll be told, Trudy will have a discussion with them, I'm sure, and I can mention it at planning too, that in the future, the only thing that comes to this board are any amendments or revisions to the zoning ordinance.
And that's where I said
Do you have-
that's what our intent was, but people here took it differently. Jody and Karen thought they were doing the right thing. So it needs to be spelled out.
So are we going to give Phil direction tonight then to amend what we've already?
It's already in the zoning, like Phil said, it's there, their direction. They had been following that direction for years, then we,
I know, but I'm saying, do we need to rework it again?
no, we don't need it, because
Mr.
it's in the
Francis.
zoning.
As far as disposing of these agenda items tonight, and Nancy already touched on it, what we should do is direct our planning department to accept the rezoning applications from the landowner, instruct the landowner, if they're here tonight, to, at their convenience tomorrow if they want to go to planning, submit their applications for their proposed rezoning, and then they will be processed according to the dictates of the Zoning Enabling Act, which again is simply, they submit their application, it goes to planning, a public hearing will be held on the request. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to either recommend approval of the requested rezoning or denial. Then it comes directly here. So it can, subject to the Zoning Enabling Act and the timing of the publications and so forth, which that takes a little time. It'll get here quickly because again, the county step has been eliminated. So it'll get here quickly. And remember, with a rezoning, when an applicant or a landowner asks for a property to be rezoned, and they're not suggesting conditions, also known as contract rezoning, then any use that's permitted within the zoning district that they're requesting to be rezoned to is then a permitted use. We can't tell them or place conditions on it. It's a permitted use, or it may be a special land use that they then can make application to the Planning Commission for a special land use permit if that happens to be the case.
Okay. Mr. Francis?
Is there such a thing that might help, like just notification to the board? These are the applications that we've received in the last month, and, A through Z don't have to be approved. They match the zoning ordinance, and the others do not, and they'll have to go a different route.
Yeah, again, the only time right now, as I interpret the resolution and the policy set forth in the resolution, the only time it would come before the board is if it required a
So it's already
change or
written like that.
modification to our zoning ordinance.
So it's already written like that. Okay, so Jody and Karen just assumed that everything needed to come.
Right,
Okay, so,
right.
okay, so
But
I'm
it
clear
will
on that
come
now.
back.
Okay,
We will have, when Paul wanted
I think we're good, Paul.
don't we do the final after the planning? after
Oh,
the public
absolutely.
hearing?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they'll all come
Yeah.
back here to us, Paul.
Nancy, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would. I'd like to move that the board directs the planning department to move forward with a request to rezone 2 parcels from C1 local business to R2A, 1 family residential on parcel numbers 5802-665-00500 and 5802-665-00600 located on Borg Avenue and Lewis Avenue and on Valetta Avenue and Lewis Avenue.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Mr. Clemens, discussion? I seen your face back there. I just want to make sure you understand. So tonight isn't an approval. Okay, tonight's just basically letting you know that, hey, this board supports what you're doing. So you'll go through the normal process now, and then it'll come back to us for final approval. Okay, so I just want to make sure you were clear.
I'd like to move that this board direct the planning department,
We didn't do a roll call.
oh, I'm sorry,
Could you call the roll, please?
trying to hurry it up.
Ms. Tinevery?
Hi.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Ready? Okay. I move that this board direct the planning department to move forward on Fire Creek Real Estate LLC rezoning, request to rezone a parcel from C1 local business to RT, 2 family residential on parcel number 5802-034-001-10, located on southwest corner of Fire Creek and Lewis Avenue.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
Just real quick, I just want to make, again, my point was, and you stated it right there, Paul. What I was trying to talk about is a process flow. And for anybody that's been in large businesses especially, and there's multi-tiers and levels of people and organizations, you just said it yourself. Jody and Karen thought they had to come here with this. They thought everything had to come here. Even though we've got a document that everybody's saying, oh, we got a document, it's already there. Everyone missed the point what I said. They interpreted it one way, so that's why I said it's got to be very clear in whatever language we have or process flow. That's where a lot of things get mixed up especially in government versus regular business, because people don't put process flows together. Everything's just winging it, and everybody does what they think they're supposed to do, not that there's any ill intent. So, that's just my 2 cents, and I've been preaching processes and types of things like that. You've heard me for how many years? And I've offered, simple spreadsheets and work with people and do different things to document things, put things together to keep track of, and it's like deaf ears. And I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm not here 40 hours a week in the building. Other than that, if I was here 40 hours a week, I'd be helping people left and right, trying to put things like that together. So, just my 2 cents.
Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnerberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
First Prieur votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Phil, is there a way to do what he's talking about? I get what he's saying. I mean, that way in the future, or is it too difficult to?
The planning department was doing that.
Yeah.
And then we put a wrench into that.
Right.
But I'm saying with what they have right now, so it was just
They just
Well,
go back to what they were doing.
okay.
Yeah, we could try to better define in that resolution what it is they are to do when they receive an application.
But I'm saying, what he's saying is take everybody out of here. Is it clear enough?
I'll tell you what, Paul, let me get with Karen, and I'll talk to Karen. I'll have her pull it out, and I'll start to work with her, and a process flow chart, the yes/no chart. I'll get a hold of Karen, and that'll be just an amendment you can just attach to it. Actually, it doesn't even have to be part of the procedure. It can be just a process flow, more of a work instruction, not a procedure or process has to be adopted, but this is just a guidance process flow for work instructions.
Mr. Springer?
Don't we have to change the resolution that we created?
I would recommend it, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we really need to do.
Well, now you're going backwards. Everybody already says that we don't have to. do it
No,
that
the
way.
resolution that this board created caused them to start sending these all to us. So we need to fix that resolution.
Okay.
So it says they go back to the way they used to do stuff where we only got,
Now, hold on now. I just asked this question earlier now, dadgummit. I asked if what we have in place, okay, is what you just explained about it comes to this board if it's an amendment or if
It's not that well spelled out.
Okay, so-
End of story.
We did.
It's not spelled out.
It's not that well spelled out. What we did was what I did is what the board directed me to do. Okay? So that was done. And it's been used for a purpose. And out of an abundance of caution, Karen and Jody have felt that, well, any rezoning request should come to the board out of an abundance of caution. So nobody is to be faulted here at all. If you go back to the genesis of this resolution, there were board members who felt before we have our legal counsel rewrite a zoning ordinance to provide for a use that's not provided for specifically in a township, it would be a good idea to get the take from all board members before we spend legal money, before we do those things. So that's the issue I think you still may want to come here. So if we break it down in those components and change the resolution, and you could incorporate your flow chart into that, Rick, as long as it complies with the Zoning Enabling Act. It can be done together as a comprehensive document, and it's not going to take much to do it. It really isn't. So that's my take on it.
Ms. Stannery?
Well, I'm glad we're getting this straightened out, and I apologize to anyone who's had to wait or go through extra steps. But based on what Phil just said, I do want to clarify that what brought this about was actually a need. I came into a meeting whereby people were talking to the attorney about redesigning the ordinance, and the board hadn't heard about it. So That's what we can't have. We can't have people calling the attorney, getting something moving forward about the ordinance unless the board has approved it first. That's the whole crux of it. It wasn't wrong what we were trying to fix, or what I felt needed to be fixed, because you can't call up and say, hey, I want you to write a new ordinance about this because it doesn't meet my needs. You know, the board has to approve that first. So I just wanted you to know that wasn't wrong what we got started, but the interpretation ended up causing problems.
The good news is,
Yeah,
we can fix it.
right,
Okay.
right.
And
All
going
right.
forward, it'll, I think, run much smoother.
Okay.
Much more better.
All right, sounds good. Okay, item 8D, approval of website redesign. Ms. Hirschberger?
So the Communication Media Committee, our commission, was working on updating our website. And like I explained in the memo, we looked at different government sites, and they all went back to Revise. So I asked Revise for a agreement to change the website. This is what they came up with. Now I'm bringing it to the board now, but I don't know. They did work it out so that we could pay for part of it this budget year, which we have in the budget, and then the rest in the next budget year. So I didn't know if this board wanted to do this, if we wanted to wait till the next budget year, but they did break it down, and I don't know if they'll hold the agreement that long. But I'm presenting it to the board. The Communication Media Committee recommended approval of this, so now it's in our hands.
So how much, is this company local?
Troy, Michigan.
Troy?
Yeah.
Do we have local companies that do this that are reputable, that?
I'm not sure. These Revise works on government sites.
Okay, and I'm just curious, because I did get a text from a resident today asking why we don't have a local bid or whatever, but I just was curious to know. Ms. Tenenberry?
Okay, I mean, I know other townships that use local, but there are some townships that have really nice, Monroe County Townships has really nice websites, and some that aren't so nice, so, I mean,
Right. When we were going through them, we came
Yeah.
across some that were not
right.
good.
That's my question. Do you, the Communications Commission, get to say how it looks?
Yes.
Okay, so.
We actually told them what we wanted it to look like. We found other townships that we liked, that were very user-friendly, and we said, okay, we saw this website, this website, this website. We want ours to look like these. We want it to be able to do what these websites can do.
Okay, because I don't want to have to click off something to click on something else.
Right.
And then, I mean, I have to go back. It's just cumbersome, so good. If we have a chance to, and might I just send you a memo of things that I like? I'm not saying you have to do it, I'm just saying, just some ideas.
I would ask a millennial.
I'm talking to Trudy, excuse me.
No,
I'm just saying, do we have a chance to give suggestions as well?
At this point, this is what they've given us. You can
Oh,
give
I
me
see.
suggestions, but I
Okay.
don't know
Well,
how
I'll-
that would incorporate with what they've already presented
Well,
us.
this doesn't tell me if I can click off one thing and click on another and get back to the other thing before you, never mind. Okay, my other question is, you're saying that the contract is in the amount of $8,336, but
Correct.
then it says $10,763 over here. I get that that's the annual, but
Yes, they
you said we
include-
already paid the annual.
The annual is paid up until June 15th of 2020, then we would owe the annual fee again, because that's something we pay every year as it is.
So
Oh,
we
so
have a
it-
contract with them
Yes.
already, okay.
It would be still in this budget.
Correct.
Okay,
So
so that
the
would
June
have to be
15th,
included.
that is budgeted already for,
Okay.
to renew that contract.
So
Okay.
is this? a
And
con-
then my
I'm
last
sorry, I'm
question, thank
sorry.
you, thank you. My last question is, what's the timeline?
It would take approximately to get up and running and for them to move everything, we're talking a few months.
A few months, but not into the new budget year, or? I mean, we could pay
They,
them.
they may finish it before our new budget year, but we wouldn't have to pay the remainder until the new budget year. I've asked them about that because we did not have the full amount in this budget year.
Okay,
So when I called them, I told them, is it possible, because they wanted it all up front. And I said, that's not possible. We'll definitely have to wait till the next budget year.
So they're requiring 4,500,
Correct,
and then the remainder can be paid.
in the new budget
So then
year.
if there's something we don't like, and we have that fixed?
I can talk to them. I mean, there's no hurt right now in talking
Right,
and asking about things.
okay.
Is this a contract that automatically renews every year?
Yes, as long as we have that website up and running.
Okay, any more discussion, Mr. Steiner?
I think it's just a small typo. The front page says that the balance of 8336, but if you take the 2,400 off, it's not 8336.
I thought it was.
It'd be 8363.
It's a typo.
Okay.
It's a typo.
Oh, yeah,
It's just a
typo.
typo.
Okay, I look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I only have one other thing. I'm in support of it, but I was going to ask if we could be sure that there's full SEO and analytics on the new site so that future boards can watch that and can adjust the website based on what real use is and traffic and not guessing about where people are going and why they're getting there. It shouldn't be an additional charge. It's just something they have to turn on when they're
No,
programming.
And TC had emailed me earlier about that, asking me if we did it right now, and we don't. What that would take is the board to allow me to create a township Gmail, and then through Google, we could add that for free to the website. We could do that now if we wanted to. I just didn't feel comfortable creating a Gmail for the township without permission of the board to do so, to add that tracking onto the website.
And for explanation, it would be an email that exists in a file drawer somewhere. It would never be used. It's not, no
Correct.
official township business is done, but it gives us the ability to watch the website, see where people are coming in, how long they're staying, what they're doing, what times are they coming to the website.
I
And so
think
you
it's
can make it
awesome.
more functional
Yeah.
over the future years. But without that data, it's always a guess.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Is that like Big Brother watching? Okay. I just wanted to say that this says 5-year agreement with free website redesign during the year 5, during year 5. So it's 5 years.
Right, but as long as we have the website, we'll pay that.
They'll do it for
Annual.
free.
Right.
I look for a motion.
Okay. Let's see, I move that we approve the revise company to a, well, actually, I'm not sure how about you wording it, Trudy, and I'll support it, because I'm not
To
sure.
approve the revised web service sales agreement as presented.
Oh, I know, but is that, it's the 10,000 for the year? or-
It's it would be the $8,363 for the agreement, and then the $2,400 annual
Okay,
software
support,
subscription.
support, that's what I thought. I'm sure.
And just real quick comment, Trudy, do we need to state, like you said, about part of it going into the next budget year?
We can put that in there, because we have to pay the $4,500 to start this, and then the next payment would be in the next fiscal year, so
I
July.
mean, whatever
contract already.
whatever you talked about, I mean, we
Correct.
should just probably put it in the motion that we're going to budget it that way.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
in the
revise it.
contract already,
Mm.
on this
Mhm.
third page. 4,500 this year and 3,863 after July 1st, 2020.
Correct.
So it's
Because
already
I
there.
asked them to put that in there, so we'd have it in writing. Yeah, Nancy.
I support, yeah, I mean, I accept that.
Okay.
Could you call the roll?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye,
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8E, approval of Monroe County Road Commission contracts, 7 separate road contracts, and discussion on Adler Road. Mr. Francis?
Well, there's I think you got a revised schedule of the 7 contracts, and there was one on the desk tonight, so there actually is 8 contracts to approve tonight. The summary just gives a brief explanation of what it is. We have to vote on each one of them separately. It shows the township's cost, the road commission cost. One of them we share with Erie Township, it shows that, and then the total of the contracts. So with your permission, I could run through each one and answer any questions you might have. The contract number 1 is for Clegg Road from Adler to Monroe Road, and it's a single chip seal and edge lines. It's .59 miles. The township's participation is $12,504.04. Anyone else, and our participation is $12,504. So if there are no other questions, I move that we approve that contract as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported by Ms. Tinberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Number 2 is Clover Lane. It's from the state line to Whiteford Center Road. It also is a chip seal and edge lines. It's .58 miles. The township's portion is $3,171. The road commission's portion is $9,510, and the total contract is $12,681. And I would like to move that we approve that contract as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
So that means we only have to pay $3,171 out of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Number 3 is Erie Road from Lewis to Crab. That's 1.02 miles, and that is a hot mixed asphalt zone patching and a single chip seal and edge lines. The township's cost is $44,674. No participation from anyone else, so the total cost is $44,674, and I move that we approve that contract as presented.
I'll support that, but I do have a question. Is that a primary road? Part of Erie is a primary road.
No.
It's a local road, it says it right on the contract. It is a local road.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Any
Sorry,
more
all
dis-
of these are local roads. Excuse me.
Okay.
Any more discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Number 4 is Erie Road from Crab to Minks. That's .98 miles. That's a single chip seal and edge lines. The total cost, again, is all Bedford's, $19,124, 0 from the road commission. Total contract of $19,124, and I move that we approve that as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported by Ms. Tinberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Now, this one you'll really like. Number 5 is Erie Road from Whiteford Township line to Lewis, 4.10 miles. And it's single chip seal and edge lines, and it's 100% funded by the road commission. 0 funds from Bedford, $78,102 from the road commission, and that is the total of the contract. So I move that we approve that one as presented.
Second.
Motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
I have a question. Okay, so if this is not a primary road, what is their reason for paying 100%?
Well, we get roughly 85,000 or something like that for primary,
Right, that they
For the local
allocate to
system.
primary roads.
no,
Or, local roads, rather.
We get 85 or something like that, that they dedicate to the local road system. You can come on up, Barry. Well, I'm sure we'll be asking you questions. Every year, that's every year, Nancy, and you dedicate that to whatever project. Right?
We get more than
The
85,000.
reason why you're seeing the variation in costs
Every year,
this year is because the road commission every year dedicates a certain amount of money, funds that they put aside for all local roads for townships to help assist in paying for the costs of those improvements. This year, the road commission has taken a big step forward by saying, we will take care, they will take care of all primary roads over the next 5 years. So you will see no contracts this year for primary roads. To make their life simpler, though, what they have done is take the allocation that they would normally have given for Bedford every year and divide it up a little differently. So that's why you're seeing, you're still getting the equivalent of the same amount, but they've made it so their accounting system is a little easier, but you're still getting the same amount of money for your local road improvements each year that you did in previous years.
So they're getting rid of the state contract was supposed to give us more money. Is that included in that? Not this, I'm talking, now you've raised my,
Not for local roads. They're giving you the same amount that they have for local roads, but they are assuming responsibility for all improvements for the primary road system. In previous years, we had many contracts that you approved the share costing for the primary road system,
okay,
and now you're not seeing any primary roads.
okay, thanks, that says a lot. I'm thankful for that.
Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Ms. Tinderberry?
Aye,
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Prony?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
Number 6 is section road from Whiteford Center to Secor, and that is .95 miles. It's a single chip seal and edge lines, 100% funded by the township with a total cost of $19,256, zero from the road commission, and the total contract is $19,256. And I move that we approve that contract as presented.
support,
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinderberry?
aye,
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Prony?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
Now, this one's a little unusual. Number 7, it's Minks Road from US 24 to Route Road. That's 4.57 miles, and it's 2 inches of aggregate or new stone lift. We're sharing that contract 50/50 with Erie Township. So our share is $40,895. Erie's share is $40,895, and the total contract is $81,790. And I move that we approve that one as presented.
support,
Okay, motion is supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion?
I got a couple questions on that. How often, and Mr. Francis, do you know how often does that get done? Or Barry?
Yeah,
Like how often, like Minks, something like that's getting that done?
it could go 20 years. I mean, they grind that up and
It
grade it.
just seems like it's like a lot of money for a dirt road. That, and I don't know, I haven't been on a Minks road in a long time.
Okay.
Generally, it's 7 to 10 years for
Okay.
new stoning on the road.
Okay. Thought I had remembered hearing something about that, like them making, like disbanding that road from Telegraph to, what would be the next one? Dean? Is that not? I thought I even remember hearing that from someone up here.
This stretches all the way from Telegraph to Route.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I thought I
There- we
heard
have
that they
had-
were like getting rid of that little section between Telegraph and Dean. Like that wasn't gonna, do you remember?
Someone come in and asked
I
if they
remember
could
hearing
petition
that.
and get rid of that, but nothing ever came
Okay.
of it.
I think you're talking about Crab?
No,
No, it was Minks, the little section, there's that little section between Telegraph and Dean, and I remember hearing that, like I said, I thought up here, that they were doing something to get rid of that little section of road.
who was?
I don't remember.
the owners were trying to get rid of it, but they wanted to do right, they were
Abandon
going to do a petition to abandon it. but the petition, I never saw the petition, so,
People live on that road?
there's farms.
Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0.
Now, the last one is number 8 that we'll all need to add to this summary sheet. Number 8 is Washington Street between Central Avenue and Kinney Street. It's about, oh crap, how long is it? It's not a very long distance. It is a resurfacing project.
No, this is, I'll explain it a little better. It's a drainage project that was an emergency, and part of the drainage issue was tearing up two residents' driveways. So this was the cost to resurface the driveways.
I mean, a drain commission drainage?
Yeah,
A drain?
yeah, no, road commission. This was road commission right away.
Is there underground drainage there? Storm drains or?
Yeah, they had to do a project. It was emergency. People were flooding, and so this is what I've talked about a few times, that the road commission in this area, again, is underfunded, and they need partnerships. So I'm going to be talking about that come budget time, that we need to budget, $5,000 a year for these smaller projects where they need a partnership on. But this is one of them. And like I said, this was an emergency thing we couldn't really do. This was 8 months ago, and they finally got a bill to us,
So
so,
there's only two driveways?
yeah.
Two driveways affected on this whole stretch of road?
It was, there wasn't a huge section that they did, it was like 2 lots.
I move we approve, oh, I'm sorry, Paul, you go ahead.
Anyway, the amount is $1,008, 100% funded by the township, 0 by the road commission, for a grand total of $1,008. And I move that we approve that contract as presented.
I support.
Okay, motion is supported, discussion. I would just like to say, technically, it wasn't 100% the township, because they performed all the work and provided a lot of the material as well. So I think it was a 50-50 share when it was all said and done.
Well, I mean, it's obviously not for the resurfacing of these driveway approaches, but it should have been in the road commission. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the road commission, but when it's their job and the drainage, they are taking care of it in order to protect the road. They're not taking care of it to protect the homeowners. So if they have to do some drainage to protect their road, I don't mind paying. I don't think the homeowner should have to pay, so I don't mind paying to do those approaches. I do know that the road commission doesn't do that, but I don't know what it would be 50-50, because this doesn't have any road drainage in it. It's just resurfacing up the driveways.
That's because they did all that road drainage,
Yeah.
and then they
should
billed
pay
us
it all.
for the driveways.
Yeah.
But they paid for all the drainage and the digging up. They were out there for 2, 3, 4 days, I think. They were out there. So, I mean, their end was probably a lot more.
Good.
Could you call the roll?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion.
Then just to
Pass
summarize
7-0.
that, a new total at the bottom of that summary page is as follows. On the township column, which is the first column, it's $140,632. On the road commission or Erie, their share is $128,507. And the grand total for all of those is $368,139. Just, it's hard to put a new total on when you get one on the table, but that's it.
Did you say 368,000?
Yes.
I think it's
268,
269.
Yeah, I was
excuse me.
I was just gonna say, nobody else spoke up. I was starting to question myself, but
I was looking at,
That
I
was
thought it
just,
said
It was a
260.
test.
that was just a test.
Well, I was waiting for somebody.
yeah, they had a little zero there.
It's 268, 139.
All right. Okay, so, Should call the roll, please.
I'm
Well,
happy
we already
to
did
do
the roll.
that.
We did that.
For
Good.
the Adler,
Oh, I'm good.
Adler discussion.
Discussion on Adler Road, Mr. Bushman. We've had a lot of discussion on Adler. I've met with Whiteford Township a couple of different times, had some phone conversations. I've met with them. They've got their ideas on what they think is the fix, and the road commission and our engineers have thoughts on what they think the fix should be. So Barry's here to kind of give us some background on that and his thoughts on it, so.
Sure, I'll be glad to. And I guess I'd like to say I appreciate the discussion you've had on your zoning. I think that, you've certainly taken the correct action. I think this was the only time I've come to a township now in recent history that any township either we represent or I've stood before and with a private project that it's come before the board first. The Zoning Enabling Act, as Mr. Goldsmith said, usually goes before the Planning Commission and then directly to the board. And as part of our streamlining development, as part of the Monroe County EDC, that is one of the reasons that the county board did eliminate the Planning Commission as a step to streamline processes. And as we all know, that is a absolutely critical step when someone's trying to develop land or come before the board or a township to get approvals. Time is of the essence, and so I appreciate the action taken tonight, so, on behalf of the Monroe County EDC. So, having said that, yes, we talked briefly a little bit on the road projects tonight, and as you can see, the Road Commission has taken a big step forward and has taken over a lot of the primary roads, so, and your road program this year reflects it by the reduced amount that the township is participating. We've made some great strides over the last several years. You've dedicated a significant amount of money to various road projects, extending most of the roads, including, in fact, all of them, Jackman, Dean, Crab, all the way to the North Township line. That really leaves us very few roads that we have to deal with, one being Adler Road. And Adler Road's one of those ones that is narrow, has very questionable base, is in very poor condition, and is probably over the years, we've been very successful doing the northern road projects. It's cost us $300,000 to $400,000 per mile to do those road projects. But a lot of that was due to the fact that in previous years and previous boards, the road commission has had the road commission add stone to the road, prepare the base, set the drainage back within the 66-foot right-of-way. Typically, the roads are approximately 20 to 22 foot wide with 3 to 4 foot shoulders, and the ditches are set at 26 foot off center line of road. That's a standard, and it's been the standard for probably well over 40 plus years with the road commission for drainage and the general geometrics of the roadway. Because those roads had the drainage set back and had existing stone base, we were very successful in doing full depth recycling and paving of those roads still having room left to put some stone on the shoulders and still getting those accomplished without doing virtually any drainage on those roads. However, occasionally you come up to a road that has had no previous work on it. Adler Road was probably a sleepy country lane. And until recently, we do have one subdivision, Deerfield Woods, that did develop many years ago and does empty out onto Adler Road, but the ones that are recently being developed are the Adler Estates, and there's approximately 95 new lots being developed. Now, if you go to ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, based on all their documentation and research, there's approximately 10 trip ends per day going to be generated per household. So that's going to add almost 1,000 trips to that road per day when it's fully developed. The road commission had done a recent count on the sections of Adler Road. And right now, and this was just done in 2019, and these were, just keep in mind, these were one-day counts. The stretch from Stearns Road to Clegg was 690 vehicles per day. The stretch from Clegg on up to, the northern half mile was about 660 cars a day, and the last stretch up to about Concert Road was about 500 cars a day. If you add the new development to that, that'll probably push the traffic on Clegg Road probably up to close to 1,500 cars a day, at least for sure on the southern half mile, where the new subdivision will empty out, and probably most of that traffic will head, I would expect, down to Stearns Road. Just to put that in perspective, School Road has 320 cars a day. Now, this is the most recent traffic counts I give you from the Road Commission, because they're not updated every year, and some of them are a few years old, but School Road has 320 cars. The northerly mile of Douglas has 510 cars. The northern mile of Jackman has 560 cars. The northern section of Crab Road has 270 cars. The stretch of Crab between Samaria and Erie has 530 cars. The section of Section Road has 290 cars. So to put it in perspective, this road already generates more traffic than any of those other roads that we've recently paved. And all those roads were paved at 22 feet wide. In fact, if you remember, a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, was it, maybe, that it was determined that the Road Commission found that when they got out there to do School Road, the pavement base wasn't 22 foot wide, and this board decided to, I believe it was around $60,000 to pay for them to go in and excavate and actually create a base that was adequate and still pave that at 22 feet wide. So, why the width? And I apologize right now, because what's happened is, unfortunately, with the new technology and equipment, my computer no longer has the same type of connections that the older style of projectors have. And the connector that we've been working on that, as you saw, for a few minutes, even though the people maybe at home can see it, because I did send the information online. But right now, my computer will not link with your projector. We've tried a couple different things with the jumper cables. But let me give you a little
Hey,
bit
Barry, can we just put the laptop up here so the board can see
I'd
it?
be glad to do that if you want to either gather around, or if you think you can see my projector.
Because if it's not plugged into that, you really don't need to see it anyways there. Huh?
No, I can try to present that. Like I say, the people at home
They're seeing it anyways.
are seeing it anyway, so, but.
Oh, you can't, we can't see it anyway. Yeah, never mind.
It's gonna be tough for you.
Nancy can read it, so she'll relay to us.
And she
Well,
can't hear you unless it goes back to the
this
mic.
document, and what I'm looking at is the spreadsheet on the document. What that document is a section right out of the MDOT 3R standard guidelines for road width. And what that is essentially for road commissions, road designers, road improvers. It's sets a minimum standard for road design or road improvement. 3R is not intended to be new construction, that's 4R. 3R is essentially rehabilitation, repaving, and the like. So as you see, that the standard for a road with up to 750 cars a day should be 10 feet per lane, or 20 foot in width. If it's over 750 cars a day, it should be 11 feet lanes or 22 foot in width, essentially what we've been paving every one of our other roads in the county. In addition, if the road's between 750 and 2,000 cars a day, they recommend 3-foot shoulders. And if it's less than 750, it's 2-foot shoulders. So if you look at a road that, like Adler Road, it's 18-foot wide. And some of the shoulders are virtually non-existent. They may be 1 to 2 foot wide. A lot of them come to the edge of the the chip seal, and then there's kind of an earth rounding, and it falls directly into the ditch. So what you have is a situation where you've got, in many cases, minimal shoulder width. And so what really needs to be done on a road like this is to properly widen it, put proper base, and allow some shoulders. You should always have some recovery room, you know, at essentially the maximum width of a vehicle or trailer is 8 feet. So when you really add that up, you understand why they set certain standards and want to see the road at least 10 feet or maybe 22 feet in total width with 2-foot shoulders. Well, Adler Road doesn't come close to that. And so, in addition, I've looked at the road, and I'll look at some of the photographs, and I'll try to advise so they keep up at home. This is some of the roads that we've recently done.
Nancy, turn your
I'm showing the Crab Road.
He can't, people at home can't hear you, so maybe talking to Nancy's microphone.
Okay. This is.
Hey, Barry,
Hold it
just
for
use
you.
Nancy's.
Okay, I'll try Nancy's maybe here. If I can do that. This is our most recent addition. This is Crab Road, where we just finished the last 2 miles, essentially about 21 foot of pavement. We were able to squeeze it in between a couple guardrails that on a couple culverts that existed out there. As you can see, we've got, generally 2 to 3 feet of shoulder. Going down, this is that stretch of school road I mentioned, that the road was a little narrow, so they base widened it, and so we could pave it at 22 feet, or roughly 21 feet asphalt, and it's got about 2 to 3 feet of shoulders. And I'm just going to show, what I'm going to do next is I'll try to just show, I've got about a dozen, 16 pictures here of pictures I've taken over the last week or so of Adler Road. And what it does demonstrate is there's really questionable base, if there's much base at all in that road. It's been seal coated at best, and it's breaking up severely, not just along the edges of the road, but down the middle of the road. And it's been cold patched, and well, you can just see some of the pictures, and I'll try to demonstrate, and gives you a pretty good indication. So, okay. I'm going to skip through a couple of them because they all look about the same. Here's a demonstration. I'll just jump to the last slide, or basically almost the last slide. I guess it's a second from the end. But just shows you some of the seal coat that's broken up and the fact that the shoulders fall off basically right from the edge of the road. So.
Yeah, I went and drove it today before the meeting, Barry. You just got to drive down the middle.
Yeah, well.
I hope you don't meet anybody.
And quite honestly, that's why they have narrower roads when you have low volume traffic, because you don't run into too many cars. Surprisingly, I was actually surprised to see the higher traffic counts that we do have on Adler Road. And obviously, it's going to get greater as we start to develop, or as Adler Estates fully develops. And
Well, Barry, to add to that, Adler's a cut-through, for a lot of people to get, to not go through in downtown Lambertville and have to turn left. A lot of people, because when I lived off Temperance Road and I was in construction, I would go down Adler Road all the way down to Concierge and take that down to, Temperance, so.
I am surprised when I'm out there for a road that you wouldn't think would sustain as much traffic, but there's regular, in fact, if you can see in those pictures, there's usually 1 or 2 cars in every picture of people driving or passing me on that road while I was out there. So having said that, I think the right fix is to truly assess the base, which I think is very marginal out there. Probably do a typical fix like we've been doing, like either a base crush and shape or an FDR, full depth recycling project, but we need to get the width to a reasonably acceptable width, which in many cases will involve widening the earthen shoulders and setting some of the ditches back where there are ditches as they exist. Now, having said that, those are, when you start to do that, that gets very costly. I mean, the improvements to a rural road these days can easily run $900,000 or more per mile. And so it is one of those situations to really make a good assessment and evaluate the road properly, determine what the road base is really, what it is out there, how wide it is, what can you do with it? Do you have to add additional stone before you even do a full depth recycling, and before you pave it? And then get it to the proper width, allow yourself some recovery room and some shoulder width where it's needed, and start to chip away at it. I know it's an expensive proposition for you, but as my dad always told me, and I learned my lesson over the years, when you got to fix something, you got to fix it right. And I've learned my lesson a couple times. So, but quite honestly, I think that's the right fix. Could you put a Band-Aid approach on it, which would allow some moderate resurfacing?
Well, Barry, speak to what Whiteford's proposing with us.
I don't have their proposal directly. I think it's around $330,000 that the road commission says, which was what they called a wedging proposal, which was.
Talk about what that looks like a little bit.
Well, wedging is normally when you put a variable thickness of asphalt just to cover up some of the rough areas or the stuff that's falling apart. And then I think a lot of people have seen it. They did it a lot in previous years where they would spread some asphalt over the areas that are deteriorating, and then they put a chip seal over the entire road. Unfortunately, if you don't have the base underneath it, that type of surface will deteriorate. How long? None of us can really speak to that. Is it 3, 5, 7 years before you have to do something? I suppose if you keep chip sealing it, you can, and cold patching it afterwards, you can sustain it on and on, but without an adequate base underneath that road, you're going to have a situation where it's going to continue to break up, and I hate to see money spent that you're going to have to redo or it goes to waste.
So here's, I did meet with Whiteford. He did bring the contract. He did talk about what Barry just talked about of the fix. That's a 50-50 partnership with Whiteford. That's all they're willing to do. So if we go with a fix, that's different. That costs $1.2 million or $1.1 million. That sounds like that's what it could get up to with doing the whole mile and a half. Is it roughly?
Mm-hmm. It's a mile and a half.
Mile and a half.
Yeah, it's a half mile from Stearns to Clegg and a mile roughly from.
So
there
at
to
900,000 a mile, we could be looking at 1.3 million for the road. They're giving 160,000 max. That's it. They're not going above it anymore. I guess if I went to them and said, you're gonna have this road, could you go to 2? Maybe, but they're gonna be bonding that end of their project anyways at the 160. And I've thought about this a lot because they own half the road, just like the road commission owns the whole road, let's be honest with you, but their partnership would be half and half like ours because it's a local road. So my whole thought is, well, they should split it with us 50-50. Well, they are with this fix. That's what they're saying. Here's what we do, kind of. Here's kind of the action that they take, I think, on a lot of the roads in their community, right, Barry? I mean, they don't, but like I've talked with Barry, most of our residents live on the road. I think, how many houses do they have on their side? 10, maybe? Nancy?
Not very many. It's, their lots, they have I don't know, are those 5-acre lots or something?
Yeah, so I mean,
They're very big lots.
And that is the
they're-
thing. I mean, we're talking, you've got 2,000 of our residents compared to, 100 of theirs or whatever. I don't know. But I am having a hard time with splitting, like the project today, Erie Road, Minks Road, it's 50-50 match. They own half the road, it's 50-50. So that is the tough part for me is, without that 50-50 partnership, I struggle, but also I struggle with fixing a road like they're saying to fix it, and it falls apart in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, and we wasted our money. That's what I struggle with too. Now, they have said, Mr. Peroni, it'll last 40 years as long as you keep chip sealing it or doing maintenance to it over the years. But also, like you just talked about with the width and with the safety end of it and the amount of traffic, they suggest you have a certain width. Now, would we be liable for accident or something by not fixing it properly, or is the road commission? Will the road commission even let us fix it like this?
Well, I will say that I did, back last fall, meet in anticipation that this would be a project forthcoming. And it could be done in parts. It wouldn't have to be done all in its entirety. It could be done, say, for instance, the worst section that has the highest volume of traffic, say that from Stearns to Clegg as one project, and then another one from there on up to Conceer. But I had met with the engineers at the Road Commission last fall, and both with Matt Schnell and Mike Smith. And we had gone out there, driven the road, looked at it, and they asked me to put together the notes. I put together the notes, explained the widths that we talked about, the shoulder widths, the earthen grading, and the like. And I put that in summary notes. I'm glad to, more than glad to provide that to you. And basically, they came back and tweaked that a little bit, but actually said, the road should be 21 feet with, they would like to see 3-foot shoulders, and obviously that would require setting back portions of the ditch that are too close to the road, and using a base crush and shape with a hot mix asphalt surface. That's what we had talked about, and that's what we had looked at back in last fall.
And that was something we discussed too at the road meetings with myself, Paul, and Barry, is we could make it, if the board decided to go this route, we could make it a 5-year project where we do portions of it. 1 year we do the ditching, 1 year we do, to where you're kind of breaking it up. So that's a thought too, but yeah,
Although if you've driven out there recently, the road or Drain Commission just cleaned out Thornton Drain, and it's an interesting, it's a very deep ditch. It's surprising. It's about 3-4 feet off the edge of the road, and I'm guessing that's 8 to 10 feet deep. So we may, if on that northern stretch, quite honestly, that's going to be a challenge now. It may be such if we'll have to be very creative if you decide to try to widen that road. We may actually have to shift the road over or something like that away from the county drain, because it's a brand new clean out and it's very, very deep.
yeah. And the other part I struggle with too is, right now it's, we've got a lot of needs. So, other than roads, our budget's very short this year, and partially thinking with that was, We've got the fire station, and some things to take care of. And that's why, like with Crab Road, we still got about 400,000 left on Crab Road to do to make it to where it's, a truck route road, basically, that can handle 1,000 trucks a day. But we're really pushing that as much as we can. I've talked to Randy Pierce on the guardrail job and to see if we can get it to be a maintenance project for the road commission. Because it is a local road, so I mean, that's ours kind of to maintain with the guardrail, and that was $80,000 or something. So they're looking at possibly doing that for maintenance. So we're doing our best to be creative with dollars. And I know, Nancy, that's why you've got a lot to say on this project as well. So you have anything you'd like to say? I know you have a lot to say on it, so.
The more you wait, the more well, I'm not Barry, and Barry, I totally respect your engineering capacity and your manhood and everything. I totally respect you as a person. But I totally disagree with you on this, and I'm not an engineer, and I know none of you listen to me. I don't have the expertise that Barry does, but I live off this road, and I've lived off this road for 20 years. And it only started falling apart in the last 5-6 years. Patching used to be fine. So to me, that says something good about the base. I don't know. I've never dug down to look at the base, but it's true. You saw the pictures. It's falling apart. It's Bedford Township's fault that it's falling apart. This road has come up year after year, not just with this board, but in the past. Nobody wants to ever put any money into it. Why? Because it's just a dead-end road on both ends. And I understand that. I'm shocked at this per-day numbers, because we can pull up to Deerfield Woods and Adler Road, the stop sign there, and never see a car. Now, this 690 per day must be in the morning when people go to work and at night when they come home, because we don't see it. We drive down the road, down the middle, now that it's so beat up, because there's nobody that comes the other way. Maybe Barry got a time when there was a lot of people driving, but even with the new condo project, we don't see a lot of traffic on that road. So I'm not questioning the numbers. I'm sure they put down their little things and counted the traffic, but we let this road fall apart. Many of my neighbors have said, even when I was at the road commission, they said, how come nobody puts money into Adler Road? And, you can put down Whiteford all you want, but if you ever drive around the roads of Whiteford, they're all good roads. Are they wide thoroughfares? No, they're not wide thoroughfares, but did you ever hear about accidents on roads in Whiteford Township? I don't. We drive Whiteford roads over to get over to the expressway, and they're good roads. There's no potholes. Yeah, they don't put a lot of money into it in terms of engineering, but they do the annual or every 3 years chip seal, keeps them up, and it's cheaper than digging the whole road up and redoing it. And the thought of putting $1 million into Adler Road just, makes me cringe, because that's our whole budget. And Adler Road's a mile and a half. Okay, I didn't think it was that long, and it's dead ends at both ends. I've lived there 20 years, and I'm sorry, I hate to disagree with the supervisor.
I'm not saying I agree with the fix 100% because of the
But it's
funds.
not a crossover road. It's not, you don't come up Concia Road and cross over Adler to get to Stearns, because there's nothing there. You'd have to keep going back up Stearns. We don't see people using it as a crossover or connector route at all. We see residents driving on there, and I don't see it. I wanted to note the traffic count, and thank you, Barry, for bringing that up. But I don't see $1 million into this road.
Just so you know, Nancy, our budget is not $1 million anymore on roads.
Okay, well,
It's not,
any,
it's
I
six,
can't see
700,000.
using two budget years to do Adler Road. I mean, it's a road that people use to get to work in the morning and home at night, and it's used by residents, minimal through traffic.
Well, I want to add one more thing, because this is something I talked to about Barry within the third week of whether or not I need Manikin Smith for the roads. And Barry hit it on the head when he told me, he said, you don't have 50 years experience with roads. And the last 3 years of working with him and the firm has proven time and time again that they know what the heck they're talking about.
I didn't say
And they know
they
what the
didn't.
heck they're doing. And I've trusted them. And I'm not saying, Nancy, that we need to do this fix, because quite honestly, it's a tough one for me. And Barry's been spot on, with what we needed to do, with their professionalism on how they handle the roads. And so that's where I struggle too. I don't want to do a fix on a road and have it fail.
Nothing against, it's not going to fail. Nothing against Barry or his firm or anything. How much work do you do in Whiteford Township?
Very little.
Very little. And their roads are fine.
Well,
And
and Bob, I got a lot of respect for Bob Schnipke. He's done a lot of good job. I mean, he's got a lot of stone. He puts stone on the roads. He's got he chip seals a lot. He's had a very aggressive project every year for the last, as long as I've known Bob, probably 40 years.
Right.
And but on the other hand, too, he's got a couple things going for him. Sometimes the soil conditions are a little different. Sometimes the traffic volumes are significantly different because of the fact that they don't have nearly as many vehicles using their roads. So I'm not faulting Bob a lot at all, because I have a lot of respect for Bob. But this is a little different situation. I've taken a lot in consideration. I'm not offended one way or the other. My job tonight is not to sell you on a job. My job is to give you all the facts to make an intelligent decision. I look at AASHTO standards. I look at what has done throughout the state. I've been in road business and road building for over 43 years. An 18-foot wide road really doesn't meet any standard given the traffic volumes that either are out there today or will be in the future. And it's got, in many cases, virtually no shoulder. It's a situation that I wouldn't recommend anything different to anybody else. Or if Bob had a similar situation, I'd say the same thing to Bob. But
Well, this calls for 2-foot shoulders. Isn't that what that says, shoulder?
well,
2-foot?
in many
both
cases,
sides.
well, and I'm sure they're not widening the road. I'm sure it's going to be an 18-foot wide road. And keep in mind, when they drive a road like that, and I have a lot of respect for Chris, who's now just doing the roads, as well as Dave. I mean, I work with him every day. They both and I talk on road estimates. In fact, we go out and a lot of times look at roads together. So it's not, we're not doing it in a vacuum. But there's going to be spots where they're not going to get 2 foot of gravel on those roads. In fact, quite honestly, if all they do is wedge and put a little chip seal on it, we'll probably have to cut the shoulders down quite a bit, which I don't think was in their estimate, because road water ponds along there and it doesn't get off. But there's a lot of spots, and I encourage, maybe it's something, y'all should take a quick drive on it one day and look at it carefully and look at the situation, because it is one situation where I question, when I look at the road base out there, we could go out and punch a bunch of holes and see what's really out there. I mean, nobody really knows, because I don't think anybody's done a real investigation, but I'd be surprised to find much. And the other problem out there, it's significantly wet. If you go out there, you'll find a lot of problems with drainage. So that obviously, as you know, doesn't help with longevity to roads. So.
Well, I think a lot of the drainage, though, having driven on it, is because they have to fill the potholes that have been building up over these last 5 years, and they're higher than the pavement. So all I'm saying is, I live there, I drive there, seems to me like I would be one that would be saying, let's get the road fixed. And I do want it fixed, but I just don't see on a short road like that with very little, what I find is very little, we drive it actually, we probably put more tire miles on our road than anybody. My husband is running to Toledo all the time, goes down, gets on 23.
Paul had
I just don't see it.
Paul had a thought on it as well.
I did.
Well, you had your hand up earlier, but
Well, how many households are serviced by that road? What's the guess? Where I'm going is, does a special assessment to those households make any sense?
No. I live there, remember?
I'm asking
You wouldn't
her.
be on it.
It's, no.
You don't live on the road, you wouldn't be on it.
Well, I mean, a special assessment is, as Trudy indicates, obviously affects the people fronting the road, but, you know, if we look at it, Deerfield Woods, Kimberly Oaks, you know, and another 95 cars or 95 homes will be dumping traffic out on there. And of course, they would be, a lot of the damage is also being
I don't know how we
accelerated
could even
by
talk
the
about a special
concrete trucks
assessment.
and everything else, so.
I don't even know where we could even go with that. We've just fixed
So-
every road in this community without doing it. We couldn't do it on the last one that needs to be done.
But, you know, we could go out and, you know, as a thought, I mean, you could go out and you could take we could go out and take a bunch of cores and see, you know, what we have out there, you know, what the isolated areas are to try to eliminate, you know, fix the areas where there are narrow shoulders, because there are areas where it's a little wider, and come back with a, you know, a more detailed design and that sort of thing, if that's what you want to move in that direction. But certainly at this point, you know, it is a situation where it certainly needs work on it. And
How much more would it cost us, Barry? Do you have an idea of breaking it to 5 years? I mean, obviously, when somebody comes out to do a project and they can just do the whole project, it's cheaper. You have everybody out there. What would add to it, if much, or?
well, one of the things I talked with the county on, and what we're trying to do, is we had, as you know, to save money, what we've been doing is piggybacking on the county-wide paving program. That saved us significant amounts of money over the last few years. And that's been a strong benefit to every township. The road commission really has a winning program there. What we had talked about when I met with the engineering group last fall was to maybe put out a ditching program, because they don't obviously do any ditching excavation anymore, and putting out a ditching program and then trying to do a base crushing and shaping and paving operations as part of the countywide program, which would, you know, obviously save some more money. And you could do start with either a chip seal or a single course of asphalt, and another 3, 4, 5 years put a second course on, or to you know, ultimately give it strength, similar to what we're doing on Craft Road.
Do we have to make some sort of a decision of a direction tonight? Do we have time for an order for contracts to be put out in time? But I mean,
There's nothing that forces you to make a decision tonight. Realistically, no paving will be done, you know, this year.
I'm just saying, as far as the road
Yeah,
commission
but-
goes, there.
But, yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing necessarily time critical of that. If you were going to do something on a portion of it, probably in the near term, you would want to make a decision fairly soon, because as we all know, we have less contractors out there. The state just put out a bond issue, which will take all the larger contractors and they'll put them all on state highways, because that's where the money's going. So the sooner we get out estimates, the better. But at this point, we're already in February. So
Yeah.
the goal would be to, you know, get a contract set up so that you could bid maybe the excavation work, maybe late fall or spring of next year, and then do some paving in either, you know, next year, or even, you know, you don't want to leave a stone base out there.
Anybody
You
else
can
have any?
stage it.
Anybody else have any thoughts on it? I mean,
We could do like they do in Washington. go the cheap fix and let the next group handle it. That's a good short-term solution, but it isn't
Right.
a good long-term solution.
No thoughts, but just to add to the mix, that a lot of Monroe Road Elementary traffic is generated between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon and 8 and 8:30 because of the no left. When you leave the school onto Monroe Road, it's become very common practice to make a right on Clegg, make a right back on Concierge, and get back into anybody that's going northbound. And so that's where I think, Nancy, you're seeing a lot of that traffic count. And I don't know, but just as I have kids at that school and I drive them to school periodically, I'm seeing more school buses on Adler than I've ever noticed. So I don't know if they've changed their routes or how exactly that works, but I think that's where you'll find the disparity in car count and what you're seeing.
Well, Paul and I thought it'd be a good idea to have this discussion, and Barry as well, with the board. Partial of my issue is, we really can't afford a $1.4 million fix. Over a 5-year period, we could. But it's, like I said, I go back to the partnership. We're spending $900,000 on a road, and the other community that butts up to it's spending $150. So they're getting the benefits of a $1.3 million road, and they're only giving that small of a partnership.
Maybe we ought to fix just our half. See how they'd like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the board does need to give some kind of direction or some feeling of what direction we want to go, because if it is the feeling of, a 5-year, and like Barry said, Barry's not putting any pressure on us to do whichever way, he's just giving us his professional opinion, and we appreciate that. But we do need some sort of direction, because if we do want to do the Whiteford's fixed, that is a contract that we have with them. And we could get moving on it, and it could be done this year. But if we wait, 2-3 months, like Barry said, we'd be able to do like the ditching work or something this year. And the next year, we'd be able to do, something else, to.
Barry, how much would be involved in coming up with an option C? We clearly have A and B, but if you staggered it out over X number of years, just to be able to have an idea of what that looks like, we do without, again, wasting just an insane amount of money because it's not practical, or the time gaps between the work are prohibitive.
Well, there's always options. Like I said, one thing we really haven't spent a lot of time with is looking at, we've given generic costs. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, so I'm using average cost per mile. What we haven't looked at is say, okay, we have 300 feet right here that have to be widened out on the shoulder, but the next 500 feet is adequate in width. We could do some preliminary design, refine the estimate. We could also put a staggered approach where you put, put some base crush in shape and put a double seal on it for a couple of years, and maybe come back in another 3-4 years and put an asphalt surface on it. That's been done in several cases around Monroe County, and in Bedford Township we did. So, there's always options and how you want to fix it. It's just that you want to be careful if you're going to have a multi-year fix. That's one of the reasons that we've had some problems with the northern roads, is because the township had said, okay, let's do the stone base and put a chip seal on it, and then they kind of walked away from it for 20 years and the roads kind of fell apart. So, yeah, as long as you mentally keep in check that, okay, probably in the next 5 years we ought to do such and such to that road. But yeah, there's ways of reducing that cost or refining those costs. It's going to take a little bit more effort, and I'd certainly want to see how much, check that road base and look at how much stone we'd really have to add to make it stable and for the type of traffic we're going to have out there.
And I think my hesitation on that is that, going back to what you talked about with the bonding of the state roads, years 1 and 2 may be real feasible, but all of a sudden you go to execute years 3 and 4, and then contractors, supply, cost shifts, may have blown away any viability to the program. So it's not an easy one.
Now, the tough thing is like he talks about is safety. You got 10-foot ditch now, and we fixed every road. You're talking School, Crab, Douglas, Jackman, all these northern roads that get that lower traffic count, but we're gonna give Adler, which is sounding like, is 2,000 cars a day roughly after the neighborhoods are done?
Yeah, right now it's been running based on road commission traffic counts that they gave us were mid-600s, and that's without
That's without the
with the
neighborhood.
first, maybe partial to the first phase or so of Adler Estates, but they've got, I think, a total of 95 lots they're putting in there.
Okay, so traffic will be under 1,000
So,
cars.
no, probably by the time it's over, if you put a traffic hose out there, you'll probably be around 1,600 cars a day. At least on the southern half mile from Clegg to Stearns,
Okay.
which is another option. I mean, you could do that half mile, save a lot of money, put the other stretch on, look
Only
at the
problem is,
state's project in the future.
the only thing I can see doing something like that, I don't know what kind of partnership we'd get from Whiteford. Just fixing a partial, I don't know if they'd be, we'd just have to go back to the table with them, I guess. Ms. Tinderberg?
Well, if you do the southern half, then you're going to get the people who've lived in Deerfield Woods for 20-plus years saying, we've had to put up with this, so how come you're just doing this for Decker? That's exactly what you're going to hear. Is there an accident count? I mean, we've lived there 20 years. I've never seen an accident, heard an ambulance go there, or seen, I don't know if the fire department has gone there for accidents. What is the accident count?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, we can't just keep what-ifing. We have to have some accuracy. I mean, I'm giving my experience, and you're asking me to make a decision on what-ifs down 5 years. I just
Well,
don't think that
at
that's
the end of the day,
way
though, the
to-
road as it sits right now is unsafe. And fixing it like this, it is still unsafe, according to what you're telling us per the standards, correct?
Right, it doesn't meet, what I'm saying is that I am not going to use those words in a
Yeah, I was
public
gonna
meeting.
say.
Because I try to avoid, but it doesn't certainly meet the criteria of any standards based on traffic.
So meaning unsafe probably goes along pretty good with that, but
Where is it unsafe?
I
I
get-
drive there
well-
three, 4 times.
I'm saying certain traffic count, it has to meet a certain standard is what he's saying, and it wouldn't meet those standards. So,
That's paper. That's on paper. Give me some traffic, some accident count that they've had on Adler Road. You
Chief,
say
you
it's
seen any
not safe.
accidents on Adler Road since you've been here?
Well, why don't we ask the road commission for a more recent traffic count? And maybe they might have some accident report, or at least we could have that as a bit of information in our.
The one thing, and I doubt if there's a lot of accidents out there, really.
and I do too, but is that gonna help us make our
The point
decision, though?
is that if you do fix a road, one of the things you notice right now, if you drove down that road, you don't want to go over 25, 30 miles an hour, because that's about the most you're going to go down that road because of the condition. Once you fix a road, what's the one thing we're hearing from a lot of the roads we fixed? Well, how come you have the roads going, everybody's driving so fast? Well, everybody's going to be going 55, not 25. And that recovery time, and if you're passing 2 cars going 50 miles an hour down that road, and that road's 18 feet wide, and that car moves over and you got a foot of shoulder, and I'm just saying, it changes the dynamics of a road condition when you do that. And if you're going to do it, you should do it right.
Mr. Francis?
Is there any grant money available for something like that? I don't know of any, but you work.
I was gonna ask
It's
Lenny
only
on the counter.
federal aid primaries. I mean, that's typically where the road commission uses it, put their money on the federal aid primaries. Local roads, not really, no, unfortunately.
Maybe we can get the road commission to turn that into a primary and let them fix it.
That's what I've been.
But then you have to trade,
There you go.
then you have to trade a local road for that primary road. And we're wanting to do that with Crab Road right now, because Crab Road really needs to be a primary road, because it's got 1,000 trucks a day. So I'm saying it's not as easy, and when you do that trade, it takes years. Not trying to be negative, Nancy. So, I mean, we're not getting anywhere, I guess. What's the board want to direct? I mean, do you have, what's that?
We've spent an hour and we're nowhere closer to
No.
an answer. I say there's too many what-ifs and questions to go anywhere at this point.
Why don't we table it until we get some more information?
But what information do we want to get? Traffic count or accidents? I mean,
Well, we need
That
a better
works, then.
cost for one. One cost is too low, the other one's too high. We need to find somewhere in the middle if we're going to go forward. It's just,
if that's what the board wants them to do.
I'm just throwing it out because
At the end
Like
of
I
the day,
said-
if we get a $800,000 fix, okay, are we going to do that? Or are we going to do the Whiteford $320,000 fix where it's a 50-50 match?
But that's just it, you're gonna get into that scenario too.
Yeah.
Is Whiteford will take full benefit of us putting in 90% of a cost or more, depending on what we do. But,
That-
I mean, TC hit it,
right.
that if we look at some kind of option C, and I think one of the biggest things, as you mentioned, Barry, is that road bed. That, I mean, I looked at my subdivision that you talked about years ago, and I've talked to different people in there, and nobody seems to want to think much about doing anything about it, but sooner or later, that road bed, it's going to be garbage. It already is starting because the road's just crumbling up in spots because that water gets down in there and, you know, chemicals from the cars, and then you get your freeze and thaws. It's going to fall apart, and then, of course, Adler's even much over. So, but I think that's going to be our toughest thing is even if we come up with a middle ground, what is Whiteford going to do?
That's it, 160.
Nothing.
That's what I'm saying.
That's it.
That's where they're,
He was very clear with me
and
on that.
again,
Because they believe in that fix, that 320. They think it's a great fix.
Why
Biggest
not?
thing
It's
that-
worked for them for years.
Well.
Why wouldn't they?
I think the biggest thing that Barry said is that it doesn't meet the standards and an 18-foot wide doesn't cut it because I've heard how many times people have said tonight, oh, I just drive down the center. Number one, it's not legal to drive down the center. Number two, then it must not be safe if you have to drive down the center.
That's only because it's been patched year after year after year.
Oh,
It's
right.
not, it's not, if you fix the road, like this, Whiteford Center fixes their roads, or Whiteford fixes, you wouldn't drive down the center, because now the whole edges are falling apart. He showed you the pictures. You can't drive down your lane because of the patching, but that's our fault, because we chose not to put any money into it for many, many years. So, I mean,
But we've seen with driving cars to the edges sometimes, and especially garbage trucks, where we, you know, we widened parts of Stearns Road because of the garbage trucks and mail trucks and everything jumping off the side. That breaks and crushes the edge of that road faster than you can, you know, spit, because,
The bottom line is we can't do fixes like Whiteford does fixes
No.
with our
I
amount
mean,
of traffic.
come on, talk about the traffic counts. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Whiteford has minuscule traffic counts compared to Bedford Township. They don't have the population, let alone, they don't have the integration coming out of Toledo and coming out of Erie and Ida and every place else. They don't have that traffic count coming from even outside the community like we do.
Put ourselves in their place. Would it make sense to their residents if they say, yeah, we're gonna share 50% of that road, and we've got 20 houses on our side, and you've got 200 or whatever it is on
Right.
the other side?
Why don't we,
I could see their point.
Sure.
why don't we do this to move on? Barry, could you give us another option?
I'll try, yeah. I'll go back and get the drawing board if that's your wishes.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Sure, be glad to.
Okay, moving on to 8F, approval to extend roadside cutting contract for precision irrigation and lawn care. We've had this company for 12 years. There's been no increases. There's a few things about this company. They have the longer reach with the mowers to get further into the ditches. The road commission thinks they do a great job, so we've thought about extending the contract with them. So that's it. So I look for a motion to extend the contract.
And this proposal is good, even though it's dated in June 14th of 2019? Is it still good?
Mm-hmm.
Close to, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I move that we approve it as presented for the same price as the past few years. which is, I can hardly read it, it's a light,
It's
23.6.
23.6
23.6
each year.
per year for 3 mowings, right?
And he's here. Anybody have any questions for him or anything, or? So,
I'll second.
okay, we have motion and support by Mr. Steiner. And that was just a one-year contract, correct? It's good for 3 years, okay.
It says in the contract,
Yeah, it says 3 years.
22.
Okay, good, I was making sure of that. Okay, any comments, questions, discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Could you let the road commission know tomorrow? Hey, okay, item 8G, approval for building maintenance services agreement bids. This is something I did with Lewis Avenue Auto Body. We called around and got the best prices on car maintenance. They do our cars for $65 an hour plus 30% off parts. I was thinking it'd be a good idea for this board to get some contracts in place with an electrician, with a plumber, pipe fitter. So when we run into situations, HVAC people, all of you've gotten the letter that we sent out to the board last week. When we run into situations, we have a guy that we know is low bidder, that we know is, the board has chosen already, is reputable. And every time we don't have a ballast go out, we're trying to call around, finding companies we could just call the place we have a contract with. And plus, we could get competitive bids to get lower prices as well. We need to look at something as well as the architect. That's something we could definitely talk about because we have a lot of different things that we're doing, like with the fire stations and different projects with the library, with the millage. And Jacob Supply received a bit, or not Jacob Supply, we know we have 7 parking lots we have to maintain, and they need constant maintenance. It'd probably be a good idea to have a contract with somebody that's constantly maintaining our parking lots every year, checking them and taking care of them. Same thing with roofs. We probably need to get back to getting a contract with somebody inspecting our roofs that we have. So just a thought. I wanted to go out and get some bids, get some contractors to give some bids on service, and go from there. Mr. Francis?
The intent of this is not to replace our maintenance people, it's to supplement them on work that they are not able to do? Is that?
Well, correct. I mean, last week we had a gas leak out back. Our maintenance guys bought the coupler, they fixed it. If there's something they can do, they fix it. But if they can't, they're not going to replace a ballast. We have to get an electrician for that. There's certain things they can and can't do, but when we get in these situations, like for instance, out front right now, I've been trying for 2 months to get a bid on somebody to run conduit so we have lights for the Fireman's Memorial out front. I mean, we're having a hard time getting people to bid on it. It would be nice if we had that in place to where, hey, we know you're at $50 an hour, give us the bid on how much time you think it's going to do to take you. I bring it to the board approves the project, or don't approve the project, we move forward. I think it's, plus we're going to need to look at a new HVAC maintenance as well anyway, so.
Mr. Supervisor, I think it's a good idea, and I would make a motion to authorize you to move forward with seeking bids for the areas of service where initially we feel like having someone at a fixed cost and on retainer would make sense.
And we have, you have your deal here that says heating and air, electrician, plumber. Can we add in there architect and parking lot maintenance person? Perfect. And I'll hit them all. Ms. Tannerberry?
Architect for electrician and air conditioning and plumbing and?
No.
What do you
The
need?
architect would be, we have an architect, and when we have a project come up, like the fire station, we had Jacob's architect do all
That's not
the.
maintenance.
No, but I think
You've got
I think
service.
we should put it out for, I think we should have an architect, like we have like a Mannequin Smith.
Okay, I disagree with that because you mean you're talking here about service maintenance agreements and, an architect. How often do you need an architect? And so you got somebody on contract and they're going to be finding projects to be able to use the architect. You're talking apples and oranges for me, if you ask me. You either, I mean,
Just go.
do we have a contract with American Smith? I've never seen one. I've
Yeah, we
asked
have
for
a
one.
contract.
I've never seen it. I've seen an agreement that Walt signed for a particular thing, but,
This board,
well, I asked for the agreement and nobody came up with, you gave me something that Walt Wilburn signed that was for a project, not you're our you're not our, you're our engineer for
Greg Stewart was on.
years in the future.
Greg, I believe it was Greg Stewart.
Greg Stewart was
We
on when-
bid out
when
for
we-
Then I'd like to
engineering
see it,
service.
please. I'd like
Walt
to
did
get a copy.
Walt did
Could
the
you put a
HVAC.
copy in my box?
Mhm.
Well, why don't we work on the maintenance and repair items first and see how it goes? If we get into larger projects like architects or engineers or whatever,
I'm just saying we have, the fire hall where, off Monroe Road, where we're gonna be looking at the possibility. We have the library where we're talking about reconfiguring the front desk and recarpet and putting an extra room in there. There's a lot of different projects. I'm saying,
What's wrong with getting bids for each individual project? Giving more people an opportunity to put their people to work?
you can, I'm just saying, we put it out for bid just,
I
6
think it
months
should be
ago for
always
the-
put out for bid for whatever project, but I can't see giving a firm a blanket contract for every architect project we need.
all right, so we'll move forward with every one of those except for the architect then.
Okay, then my question is, what are you talking about, long-term, or is this going to be for a 3-year contract
I
or
would
something?
think a few years, so I mean, we could re-up them after every few years or something. I don't think that's a problem. Do we have a second?
I would-
No, not
yeah,
yet.
I'll support it.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Montroy. Discussion, any more discussion?
I just didn't know the rules, I guess, if that's like.
Yeah.
Is
I
there
would
any-
think from a contract management standpoint, if it was a self-renewing annual contract, that way we can take a look at it, decide whether it really worked, did it pay dividends the
Yeah.
first year, and then go from there, as opposed to being locked into some multi-year deal.
So
But
just an annual renewal type deal with a,
I would think
get
that
out of it at any
initially that
time.
would make sense.
okay. Because the township might not be happy with whoever we get,
Exactly.
type deal, okay. I'm fine with that. Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Number 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes. Come on up. Okay, seeing none, moving on to comments from township board members. Mr. Clemens?
I had nothing related to township business, but I did want to mention and say thank you to those of you who've written from this board, and then also a lot of people in this community have written well wishes for my mother-in-law who passed Sunday evening. She was an amazing woman, long-term Bedford resident. She will be missed, and it reminds me of a quote that President Reagan used, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it basically says that when we're not concerned with who gets the credit, it's amazing how much work we can get done. And I think she lived that, and I think it's a good reminder to all of us in public service. Thank you.
Ms. Tinderberry?
I just want to, well, first I want to ask Phil to tell Tom thank you for moving this whole rezoning business along. And then, I guess, final comment on the whole, we can keep spending more money on engineering. That money could well go into pavement. I just, I'd like to see how much money what the breakdown is of and again, it's not Barry, it's the fact that we're spending so much money on engineering to try to determine these roads. The Monroe County Road Commission has engineers on staff. Wonder why they can't give us different options for their road called Adler Road. Again, I've lived there 20 years. We didn't have any problems until 5-6 years ago, and now, it's fallen apart. There's no question about that. But yeah, other people fix roads without having them engineered. So that's my comment.
Mr. Steiner?
Nothing in particular right now on this board, just one quick comment. I did read an article this weekend in the paper. It was I think it was Pages of Opinion, pretty interesting. And it referenced, since we're in a huge political year and people constantly, agree, disagree, and generally it starts into arguments whether they're friends or not friends. And the article, the gist of it was that people on the right side or the left side, in today's society, they're so engrossed in basically themselves that this side over here, 60% of them cut off conversation. This group over here, 45% of that group is most likely to cut off conversation and not have any further discussion with the other party. And I think we've gotten past a similar scenario with this board where it used to be a lot of times we just, okay, fine, I don't want to talk to you about it, This board has finally, I think, come together for some good communications. And it also then went on to state, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalise, as you all know, very, very different opposing views on pretty much everything. But they were the best of friends throughout the time that Scalise was alive. And of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is still there. And it's as one of Nancy's favorite lines, for many years, let's just agree to disagree. And Paul too, same way. Let's agree to disagree. But I think the biggest thing is that we can do, whether it's local, whether it's state, whether it's federal, whether it's just friendships in general. People don't know how to talk to each other anymore. People close each other off. And it doesn't even have to be politics. It's just in general, this is my opinion, you're wrong, okay? We need to learn to talk to each other. Otherwise, this society is going to keep going the way it is today. And we're going to implode because we won't work with each other. We won't talk with each other. It's my way or the highway. And then eventually, like I said, we'll just implode. So if anybody still has Saturday's, I think it was Saturday's paper, the Toledo Blade, go back and look at that article, or you can probably find it online too. Pretty good article, just very interesting about how society is today and what we really need to think back on. The last one I heard today, again, it was done by some politicos, but it was pretty cool that I heard an old Paul Harvey clip from 1978, I think it was, and it was about why God made a farmer. That was pretty cool. I went and looked it up today. It was really interesting and pretty neat. If anybody ever followed Paul Harvey, pretty interesting. I mean, we all know farmers, it's a whole different world out there, and the hours that some farmers put in, and they are nonstop too. Go back and look that up. It may change your mind about the way we treat people today and the way we think about people today. So that's all.
Mr. Montre?
I don't have much. I just wanted to give maybe this board a quick update. That seems like we made a good decision back with the HVAC for the library, that Mr. Peroni was able to work with Wadsworth and get that lighting situation, the option one, that pretty much entire situation is resolved. And I don't know if he wants to add more detail to that, but just to be able to relay that to this board, that I think we made a good decision and that situation is resolved.
Mr. Francis?
To follow up on that last comment, but we picked a contractor that was $4,000 higher than the lowest bid for doing the same work. So anyway, that's what I
Same.
want to say. The only items I've got on my plate tonight to mention is, you probably are all aware that the real estate taxes for the winter were due last Friday, the 14th. On Monday, well, we weren't open Monday, but after that, there's a mandatory 3% late fee that's assessed, mandated by state statute, plus there's 1% interest charge on any unpaid balances. If any unpaid taxes as of the end of February must be turned over as delinquent to the county, and the county then collects it. So, and if it goes a couple of years without being paid, you could have your house foreclosed on for taxes, and we certainly don't want you to experience that. Any help you need on our end, just give us a call. The Treasurer's Department would be glad to help wherever we can.
Ms. Hirschberger?
I know I sent an email out to the board members, but I wanted to let the public know that we did receive the grant for the body cameras for the ordinance department. We did get 3 of them. They were delivered today, so we'll be setting those up. It's a good thing. Hopefully, it's going to help with situations when they're out in the field. Also, the ballots have gone out. We've received a lot back already, but we're still sending them. So if you still are in need of an absentee ballot, please contact our office and we can get you the application. And then tomorrow, I will be going to the high school and I'm going to register the seniors that are not yet registered. And that's all I have.
I want to thank Trudy on that grant. You know, it's easy to spend $1,500 in government, but it takes that extra 5 or 6 steps to go after $1,500. That just shows how much this board cares about small amounts, because those small amounts add up. So Trudy, I appreciate that. Control Systems of Ohio system was a lot better, from my understanding, Mr. Francis, than Wadsworth.
Hey, I wasn't shooting it
I know,
down.
I know, I'm just saying, they weren't comparable, the systems, right, Mr. Montre? The systems weren't really comparable.
It was significant.
It was a lot
better
of
system.
easier, user-friendly, and I want to touch on a few of those things. So, 2 meetings ago, okay, we had the Library Advisory Board here and Jody. It was talked about that Wadsworth installed that panel. Wadsworth did not install that panel. Kolsch did. And Kolsch was one of the companies, Ms. Tenderberry, that was called out there to fix it. Okay, so we tabled that item. We went with the $40,000 bid, right? No, $44,000 and some change bid. Okay, I said I would call Wadsworth to look at that system. Come to find out, they told me, sir, we didn't have that system. But anyways, we got them to go out there, and after a couple weeks, they did fix it. It has been working flawlessly for the last week. They come out on their own, they go off on their own. Last week, one day, it did have a glitch, but that was because he missed a day when he dialed it in. So everything is working good. So we did save a huge amount of money, probably, I don't know, $7,000, $8,000, which that was.
The lowest one was 55, I think.
You know, so I did call that company that got the bid at $45,000 or $44,800, and they took I asked them to take $2,500 off, and they did do that. So we ended up getting the whole job done. They're going to be starting soon. We got the contract, Phil, you know, kind of took a look at it. You know, we're going to be signing. We signed that contract, right? We signed that contract. So that job will all be done. Light, everything, $42,000. So I mean, we done real good at the end of that, if you ask me. And that's Control Systems of Ohio, and that brings us to this building. You know, eventually we're going to look at controls for this building as well, and that's something, you know, that honestly Control Systems of Ohio will probably have a leg up on, because, you know, it'll be all the same system at that point, run from the same, you'll end up saving money. So they'll, I wanted to touch on, part of the millage was concrete, fixing concrete out there. They had $4,000 budgeted for that. I met with Pat from maintenance out there, asked if he could pull the sections up that are bad. He agreed to it, that he could get the job done, and I got local 886's apprenticeship people to take that on as a project. So they're going to do that for free. We'll probably end up having to pay for concrete or something. So there's another $4,000 savings off the millage money. So I just wanted to update the board. That's what we're doing with that. So Adler's a big deal. One option, in my opinion, I would much rather have that option, to be honest with you, but I have a really hard time spending that kind of money. I just want to make sure that whatever option we do, it's the right one. But like I said, I think if it was solely our road, I would have a hard time seeing this board do a fix like that if it wasn't a partnership with Whiteford. I mean, we fixed every other road in this community. We just spent, what, 900 and something thousand on Whiteford last year, going to state line. So, it's tough to see us do a fix like this, but, I'm glad this board's looking at it, and really taking their time with it. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fireworks. The park board decided, instead of canceling the fireworks this year, which I'm super excited and thankful about. DC, I know you're a liaison for the park board and you were instrumental in keeping that going, so I appreciate it. But the park board was either going to cancel the fireworks, okay, or partner with Summerfest and have them at Parmalee Park during the Summerfest weekend, which is June 11th through the 14th. Okay, everybody, there's a lot of messages on Facebook. Oh my gosh, why don't you have it at Indian Creek? Logistically, the park board couldn't pull it off to have that amount of traffic and that amount of cars and that amount of activity in one spot. It's a lot to deal with when you're dealing with a really big fireworks display like that. The setbacks for the 8-inch shells are, I think, 600 to 800 feet circle, so it takes up big space. The show is going to be a smaller show. It's going to be Friday at dusk, roughly 9:23 probably. You will have to be at Parmalee Park or the Civic Club property to see the show for the most part. You won't be able to see it from surrounding areas. So we're going to be partnering heavy with LET. They're going to have 4 shuttle buses ready that day. We're going to have parking at Monroe Road Elementary, and I believe Indian Creek Park will be 2 of the spots. I think we're going to try to find 1 more spot, but those are 2 spots that we're going to use. I wanted to talk a little bit about the parade. The Downtown Development Authority's putting on a parade, which I am very excited about that they're bringing back. The last parade we had was when, gosh, it's been 8-9 years, 2012. So if you are interested in registering for the parade, contact Maria at the BBA. She's handling registration. Janine Bragg from Monroe is the coordinator. She's been hired from the DDA to coordinate the whole parade. She's put together a local committee of great people. So we're going to have this parade come through out of the Kroger parking lot area and the Spring Arbor area and go up Secor Road North, take a left on Summerfield, and then head into Parmalee Park and then loop through the Civic Club property and back on Monroe Road. And then, so if you're interested in that, get a hold of Maria at the BBA. Other than that, well, I think, Street Fest, they've got back to organizing Street Fest. That's August 15th. So if you're interested in being involved in that parade at all, or not parade, but festival, contact Amanda or Kristen at Barron's Insurance. They are kind of overseeing and chairing that committee. But these festivals that are put on, Summerfest, Blizzard Fest, Street Fest, I mean, you're going to be talking about anywhere from them 4 days, 15 to 20,000 people going into our community. You're bringing people from Toledo and surrounding areas. It draws economic development. People get to see our area. Like I said, it's a 4-day festival. There's going to be bands, a carnival, and there'll be 60 vendors. There'll be 12 food trucks, so it'll be a really big event. Going to draw a lot of people, but I get really excited about these events that our community can have. So especially Street Fest, there was estimated roughly 8,000 people that came last year for that. So other than that, anybody has any further questions? We stand adjourned.